Hello and welcome to another episode of The Truth About Living. You can download more episodes here on iTunes. You can watch the video version of the podcast over at the YouTube channel, The Truth About Living, or please visit me on the blog where I have lots of resources there for you for mindfulness, spirituality, and online entrepreneurship, with the ultimate goal and intention really to be to create a life that you dream. Make it a reality. So these are some of the tools that I believe help get you there. And I'm really excited today to share with you this process of mindful eating. That's the topic for today. And it's actually going to be two parts. So part one today, we're going to be getting into what we're really talking about when we say mindful eating and what it can mean for you in your life and why you might want to try this out. We're also going to be doing practice techniques. So you don't have to be too specific about what you choose for the exercise today. When I was in school to become a coach, we used a raisin. When I was giving a class, I remember doing water. We did a bottle of water. I've also seen it done with chocolate. I think I did that at one of my classes. There's different ways to engage in this, so don't feel like you have to have a raisin. If you've heard of the example of the mindful eating exercise with a raisin, just use something that is that you have access to for the purpose of this podcast episode, and then you can extend that into other food items or meal times as you like. But it's going to be really interesting. I think it's a nice way to start to connect with your food, and I'm just going to dive right into just this concept of mindful eating. And I've been covering mindfulness here on Mindful Mondays for some time now. And so if you're new to mindfulness, just a brief reminder to go back, if you can, to one of the very first podcast episodes, Intro to Mindfulness, where I lay the groundwork for what we're doing here and the differences between formal and informal mindfulness and why this may be a benefit to you in your life. So let's get started. So mindfulness, right, is something that encompasses every aspect of our life. And I think that it adds to the richness of our lives. And that's one of the reasons that I really love just the life philosophy of living mindfully. It takes away a lot of judgment, self-judgment, self-blame. It takes away a lot of the feeling of not doing something well, not being good enough, not having enough. It takes all of that out of the picture because it helps you to just focus on the present moment and what is. And so it's not about necessarily always putting a positive spin on things, which, I do a lot of work with gratitude, and I think there's a lot of value in looking at what you have and with mindful eating, looking at your food, being grateful, and there's a lot of, positivity generated from that. But at its most basic level, mindfulness is just about acknowledging what is, right, and being present in that moment. And so sometimes that moment is really enjoyable. Sometimes that moment is really mundane. Maybe you're chopping the vegetables for dinner, right? But you're really present with the experience. But sometimes it can be something that's painful, whether it's a physical ache or an emotional pain, still being present with that, right? So that we're very conscious and that we are conscious beings and are active and are acting consciously as opposed to kind of checking out, living in the past in our minds, living in the future in our minds, letting our minds get away from us and keep us up at night and not having a sense of control over our thoughts. So we can extend this then into mindful eating. And you can, as I said, since mindfulness is so life encompassing, you can put this into any aspect, parenting, your health. You could add mindfulness into any area of your life and get benefit from it. But I wanted to focus specifically on mindful eating. And you'll find if you do just a little bit of research on it, there's books, there's lectures, there's courses, there's a lot of things out there, meditations that talk about mindful eating. sometimes in relation to weight loss or diets, sometimes in relation to just experiencing mindfulness, sometimes in relation to adding gratitude to your life and presence. So one of the ways that I like to approach this is with a connection to your food, right? So, and how often do we eat when we are multitasking, when we are not fully present and therefore not fully able to enjoy the meal? When we do that, and let's face it, in the lives that we lead in our current society, culturally speaking, we tend to do multiple things at once. We tend to not focus on one thing at a time in general. So if you're having dinner time, there's probably other activities going on. There may be conversation. There may be kids, very active. There may be a television or a radio on in the background. You may get a phone call. There's other things that are happening during dinner time, right? And so the practice of mindful eating is not about necessarily doing away with all of these, regular life, real life distractions. Dinner time, a busy dinner time with conversation and family can be a wonderful thing. It's just about letting you know that there is this other way to be and choosing when it's a good time for you to really focus in on presence with your food, right? And so maybe that means the first few moments of a meal that you eat in silence. Maybe that means that when you have your midnight snack, that instead of watching television while you're having that delicious piece of pie, that you just eat the pie and let that be the only thing you're doing right then. When you make a cup of coffee, how often do we take a sip and then get right to work on our laptop, or take a sip and go right to doing something else? What about just sitting with that cup of coffee for 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and just experiencing it? And one of the beautiful things I think about mindful eating is that it's almost this idea, like a lot of mindfulness, that you have this beginner's mind. You may have heard that phrase before in mindfulness, a beginner's mind. So you're almost approaching something as though it were the first time that you've experienced it. And it's amazingly very pleasant to do that. It's surprisingly a really pleasant experience to approach a cup of coffee or an apple or anything that you're eating with this curiosity about it. And I like to tell this story about my son because he was about 2 years old, maybe a little younger. When we did this, we were making cookies at home, right? And we're pretty healthy eaters, but we're having cookies, right? So we bake some cookies, and when they're ready, I give him one. Right, we're in the kitchen. I give him one, and I go and take a bite of one, and I start to put the dishes away, and I start to run the water, and I'm eating the cookie, I'm cleaning, I'm thinking about something else too at the same time. Probably I'm glancing over at him, and I look over at him, and he has just plopped down on the kitchen floor and is completely immersed in this cookie. And I always think children are just so naturally present, and just mindfulness is just their nature. They are in the now. They are in the moment, experiencing life so fully. And so I think he's been a beautiful teacher to me in that way. He's eating this cookie, and I'm watching him, and he's looking at it as though it were something brand new to him. He's looking at it. He's taking a bite. I'm sure he's hearing the crunch of it. He sees some crumbs. He watches some crumbs fall to the floor. He's so present with this experience. And he's not multitasking. He's not doing this while anything else is going on. He is just so present with this experience. And I just thought to myself, that looks like joy, and I know we're busy, right? I know we're busy. But how long do you think it took him to eat that cookie? I mean, really like a minute at most. So we're not talking about carving out, an hour of your day so you can engage in mindful eating. We're talking about these little moments, these little jewels that reconnect us to the life experience that we really, what is all this about anyway? We want to have a high quality of life, right? A high quality of living. And so the life experience is really enjoying these things, really experiencing life. And so it's about connecting with your food, whether it's a cookie or an apple or, green juice you've just made. I mean, whether you're indulging and treating yourself or you're on a health plan, whatever it is, just connecting with it. The other time that I'll mention is I was doing this group class, and there were about maybe six or eight women, I think, in this class. And we were going to do this mindful mindful drinking experience. We had bottles of water, right? And I thought to myself, at Duke, they did this raisin, and I don't know if everybody wants raisins, and then there's like food allergies and stuff. So I was like, we're doing water. So I brought in these bottles of water, and I just created I set the stage. So it was like a nice, respectful, warm environment, and everybody was quiet and thoughtful, and I handed these out, and I just led them through the experience of, twisting the top off the bottle, and feeling the bottle in their hands and the coolness of the water in their hand, right? And then lifting the bottle up to their lips and the sensation of the water when it touched their lips, and the sensation in their mouth when they took the first sip of water into their mouths, and the temperature and the feeling of it, and the nourishing quality of the water, and how it felt when it went down the back of their throat, when they swallowed it. And could they sense when the water reached their stomach, when it started to be drawn into their body? How much of that could they sense? And it was just this beautiful process. It just took a few minutes, And afterwards, I was asking how they felt about it. And for a lot of them, it was their first experience mindfully engaging with food, or in this case, water. And there was one woman there who had tears in her eyes. And when I asked her about it, she said that she was a teacher, and she'd been at school that day, and there had been I think it was a fundraiser for individuals who were living in another part of the world who did not have access to clean water, to clean drinking water. And that had been on her mind a lot during the day. And so when she came to this class in the evening with me and engaged in the experience of having access to this clean water and having this experience, she became very emotional, right? But the thing about it is she associated a lot of negative feelings with it because she had guilt. That's where she was coming from. She felt guilty for having bottled water available at any time when there's people, halfway across the world who don't have access to any clean drinking water. And her heart was breaking with this thought. And so we talked about how we could shift, right, the acknowledgement of this experience into one where she could express gratitude for the clean water that she had, and extend that into a wish for the individuals who are part of this fundraiser, who are going to be getting more access to clean water because of this fundraiser, and extending a grateful heart that this was coming to them as well. But you can't get through all those emotions until you start with the presence, right? And life is about these really rich layers, and we want to experience it all, the richness of life. So something as simple as water, and not coming at it from a perspective of, what we might call negative thoughts or worry thoughts. coming at it from initially a perspective of presence, just noticing what is. Just the sensory experience of being in our human bodies, and tapping into that, being connected with ourselves. And then if you can extend that into beautiful, positive emotions and feelings, then I think that's just an added plus, right? So a lot of things to think about with mindful eating, and that's why I've decided to do this in 2 parts. So I want you to follow up next Monday, and we're going to be doing a technique here in just a moment, but make sure you follow up next Monday. We're going to dive a little deeper into mindful eating and do a different exercise. But for today, I'd like to go ahead and start with our mindfulness exercise for today. Every Monday, I always like to end with a technique, an exercise, because putting it into practice is what's going to make the biggest impact in your life, okay? Now, go ahead and grab, or maybe if you need to pause this, do that. But get something that you feel you can connect with during this experience. It could be something to drink. It could be something to eat. It's preferable if it's something that is kind of uniform. So as opposed to maybe it's like one ingredient kind of thing is always helpful. It doesn't have to be, but just a suggestion. So maybe, a piece of dark chocolate. As opposed to a sandwich, right? But a sandwich is fine too. But it's just a matter of focusing in. So let's go ahead and start. I think this is going to be good. You do not have to get into a meditative position like we've been doing. Typically with mindfulness exercises, you don't have to close your eyes or anything like that. All you need to do is just have your food or your beverage present and listen to my voice guide you through the experience. Okay? Now, I want you to begin by exploring this little piece of food. And you're going to be using as many of your senses as possible. First, look at the food. Notice its texture. Notice its color. Now, just for a moment, close your eyes and explore the food with your sense of touch. What does this food feel like in your hand? Is it hard or soft? Grainy or sticky? Moist or dry? Notice that you're not being asked to think, but just to notice different aspects of your experience, using one sense at a time. This is what it means to eat mindfully. Now, before you eat, explore this food with your sense of smell. What do you notice? Now, begin eating. No matter how small the bite of food you have, try to take at least 2 bites to finish it. Take your first bite. And please chew very slowly, noticing the actual sensory experience of chewing and tasting. Remember, you don't need to think about your food to experience it. You might want to close your eyes for a moment to focus on the sensations of chewing and tasting before continuing. Notice the texture of the food, the way it feels in your mouth. Notice if the intensity of its flavor changes moment to moment. And take about 20 more seconds to very slowly finish this first bite of food, being aware of the simple sensations of chewing and tasting. It isn't always necessary to eat slowly in order to eat with mindfulness, but it's helpful at first to slow down in order to be as mindful as you can. Now, please take your second bite and your last bite. And as before, chew very slowly while paying close attention to the actual experience of eating. The sensations and movements of chewing, the flavor of the food as it changes, and the sensations of swallowing. Just pay attention moment by moment. So this exercise has been one aspect of the overall picture of mindful eating. I do want to give credit. This particular exercise came from an article on mindfulnessdiet.com. And when you decide to do this, again on your own, hopefully you will, you don't need to have necessarily anything guiding you through it. Just be present with the food. Just think about your senses, right? So looking, tasting, smelling. You'll probably find that you enjoy your food a lot more. You'll probably find that you have more appreciation for your food. You're probably less likely to overeat, right? So there's some benefits to come from in addition to just presence and exploring presence. And I want to thank you so much for being present with me here on the podcast today. And please do find me on the blog at thetruthaboutliving.com. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for being here. I'm always in gratitude for your listening to this. Also for subscribes, reviews, comments. I really appreciate them. And so I'm going to say goodbye for now.